Just finally, there was a bit of a slip in the speech from the Prime Minister when he was trying to talk about freeing the hostages in Gaza, and he said freeing the sausages. That's gone a bit viral online. A bit of a slip from the Prime Minister.
I didn't catch that. Look, if that's gone viral online, it's rather silly, isn't it? Taking such an incredibly serious global conflict and problem and turning it into trivia. Of course, all the hostages must be freed, and that goes for all the people who are illegally detained in Israel as well. But let's not trivialize this. I think it was one of those moments in the speech where the Prime Minister got a standing ovation because he recognized the importance of the conflict in Gaza and recognized that actually we need the two-state solution, but you don't just say it, you've got to work for it. And he talked about the recognition of the Palestinian state, which is absolutely vital. No point in talking about a two-state solution if you don't believe there's a Palestinian state. But it has to be in line with the United Nations. It has to be in line with what has been set down in international law. And at the moment, it's not.
Well, Barry Gardiner, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on and giving your thoughts on the Prime Minister's speech. Back to you, Martin.
Tom Howard, Barry Gardiner, superb stuff. Thank you very much there. Great stuff live from Liverpool. Now, don't go anywhere because Sir Keir Starmer will be hoping that his sausage gaff is tomorrow's chip paper. I suspect he'll be getting battered for it. Stick around and we're back in the studio with my sensational, sizzling panel. After this, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man, I mean, he really was big, was snapped trying to fit into his seat on the plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:27. Joining me, Martin Daubney, on GB News now. Sir Keir Starmer has told the Labour Party conference that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it will mean short-term pain. Let's take a look.
This is how the work of change happens. A decisive mission-led government moving our country forward step by step, focused on a long-term plan. But first, we stabilise our economy. Second, we fix the foundation. And third, we build with pride and determination a Britain that belongs to you. But it will be hard. That's not rhetoric.
But it was a live speech, and Sir Keir also made a bit of a meaty gaffe.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
The return of the sausages. Now, I've done live TV. God knows I've made my fair share of mistakes, and they can haunt you. Now, joining me to react to this is the former editor of the Sunday Mirror and the very contemporary Everyday Today political commentator Paul Connew and the political commentator John Oxley. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let's start with your reaction to that gaffe. Will it be tomorrow's chip paper, blow away in the wind, or will it haunt him?
I'm not surprised it's gone viral, and I'm sure when Starmer looks back at it, he'll go, ah! But let's not take it too seriously. And rehearsed or not, he came back quite well with his put down of the headbanger protester by saying he must have got the 2019 conference pass.
He certainly did that. Now, John, what about yourself? Any sort of moments there that particularly stand out? Before we get into, I think, an interesting talking point about the more nanny state business, any lines that really stood out in that speech for you?
I think one of the things that stood out for me was, I think, the real passion. When he was talking about the riots and really sort of tackling that and, you know, what he was talking about, the racist thugs, you know, that was one of the rare times where we see Keir Starmer get really animated about something and get really, you know, quite passionate. And I think that echoes sort of Yvette Cooper earlier this morning and sort of shows that, you know, on that issue, there's going to be a real toughness from the Labour government. But also interesting that that was paired with a lot of talk about immigration, a lot of talk about the concerns of immigration, and, you know, starting to see what the Labour approach to that issue is going to be after so many years of the Conservative approach really failing to achieve anything.
I agree. I think neither Starmer nor Rachel Reeves are the greatest orators, although that was probably the most animated and passionate I've seen at that point from Keir Starmer. But he made a lot of sense, and I think, you know, at the moment the polls are looking rough, but that's unsurprising in the current volatile political climate. Well, but they needn't worry too much about that with the majority they have, albeit on a 34%.
Well, but if you look back historically, for example, in 1997, you know, Tony Blair was still soaring ahead in the polls at this point, you know, 3 months into power. So
different time, though, Martin.
Yeah, but you can't just keep saying that. The Liberal Democrat coalition, they still had a healthy, positive polling. Boris Johnson was way ahead in his polling. They were undimmed after recent change. There's something different about this regime, and it was precipitated, I think, by those riots. And I wonder, both of you gents, that hard line you were talking about there, John, about these riots being racist thugs sowing the seeds of division. In fact, Cooper earlier in the day, laying into the Conservative Party and reform as sowing the seeds of division. Now, that might land well in that gallery in Liverpool. It might land well, no doubt, with Mirror readers, but it won't land well with working class voters in the Red Wall. I wonder if you're saying it's tuned in. I wonder if it's a bit tin-eared.
Look, there was a hell of a lot of racism involved there, but there was also a lot of downright thuggery. For example,
there are a lot of people who weren't racist.
But what justification is there? We have pensioners who need advice on the fuel allowances go to Citizens Advice Bureau. So why attack and virtually destroy it as an advice bureau. Why attack a library, let alone attack a hotel full of asylum
well,
seekers?
How about asking them why? Should the Prime Minister, should the Home Secretary engage with those communities?
Look at the evidence
They did that in Tottenham in 2011.
Look at that in a lot of the court appearances. There are people there who, in fact, basically, they enjoyed having a fight with the police. It wasn't about a political protest, because some of the targets,
Some were sent down for 2 years, Paul, for Facebook posts, others for banging on doors, others for shouting at dogs. Do you not understand? And again, this is what I'm saying. It might land well with the gallery there, but this started with two-tier policing. It got onto free gear care. I'm just saying, is this the kind of sentiment that will land well with the electorate as a whole, or is he playing to the gallery?
Well, let's wait and see. But I think the polls show support for the tough action that he took, against the rioters.
Right.
So I'm not sure you're right to think, well, hang on a minute, people. It was by and large a mixture of racism and simple thuggery. Let's have a fight with the police. It alleviates our boredom.
There was a lot of working class frustration that hadn't been listened to for years. Paul, John, we're going to return to this after the news, but we have to go to the news now. We'll have lots to come in the rest of the show, including we'll be live, of course, from the Liverpool Labour Party conference with the latest reaction to Sir Keir Starmer's speech. But first, here are those headlines with Sophia Wensler.
It's 3:33. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Change has begun. That's a message from Sir Keir Starmer as he gave his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister this afternoon. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctors' strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed would be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. As well as this, the Prime Minister called for restraint and de-escalation on the border between Lebanon and Israel. He also defended winter fuel payment cuts, saying every pensioner will be better off. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK, sparked by the Southport stabbings.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, but we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary says Labour is the party of law and order, vowing to crack down on street crime, targeting offenders like street drinkers and shoplifters. Opening the third day of the Labour conference in Liverpool, Yvette Cooper's pledged to introduce Ronan's Law, banning ninja swords, which earned her a standing ovation. She also promised buffer zones around abortion clinics and reiterated Labour's plan to halve knife crime in a decade. Now, Israel is ramping up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon, with airstrikes and tank fire hitting militants as thousands flee the region. Israel's military chief says the offensive will intensify today after 1,600 militant targets have already been struck in just 24 hours. Hezbollah responded with rocket attacks on Israeli military sites, including an airfield and explosive factory. Over 550 people have been killed so far, including 50 children, as Lebanese families pack highways and flee to the south. And commuters are bracing for more disruption as dozens of flood warnings remain in place across the UK, with more heavy rain on the way. Some areas have seen more than a month's worth of rain in just 24 hours, leaving homes damaged and roads impassable. A new yellow weather warning has been issued for Thursday, stretching from Nottinghamshire to Northumberland, with 100 millimetres of rain expected in some areas. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, if you're at home shouting at the TV, why not shout at me instead? Let me know what you think about Sir Keir Starmer's speech. Go to gbnews.com/your say and read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. Back to my panel soon for more reaction. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello, welcome to your afternoon weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Should turn a bit drier for most overnights. Quite a chilly night across the north before further rain returns to southern areas tomorrow. All the heavy rain from the weekend and yesterday from this area of low pressure, that has cleared away and it's been much drier today across England. But we have seen further rain coming in across northern Scotland with a northerly wind, also feeling pretty chilly here. Smattering of showers elsewhere, but they're tending to fade, and many places, as I said, will have a dry night. With clear skies, going to turn quite chilly. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing that colder air, so likely to see a touch of frost, certainly across the mountains of Scotland. Towns and cities holding up a few degrees above freezing, and quite mild again in the south, where there will be quite a lot of cloud. And a bit of a grey start for southern counties of England. There'll be some rain here, and there will be more showers coming in across northern Scotland. But in these central parts, as I said, temperatures are going to be down close to freezing to start Wednesday. Should be some sunshine through the central belt, across southwest Scotland. Fine start for much of Northern Ireland, just a few showers coming into the north coast. Quite a bit of cloud early on across parts of northern England, and quite a grey start across much of southern England and South Wales. Generally a dry start here, but things will change. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to see more rain pushing back in here as we go through the day, spreading across southwest England quite early on, and then into South Wales and later into the southeast of England and the Midlands. Across much of northern Britain, bar the odd shower here and there, many places actually dry and bright for most of tomorrow, but it will be on the cool side. Temperatures a touch below average, struggling into the teens. Further south, a little bit milder, but with the rain, it won't feel all that pleasant. And we're not done with the rain, far from it. Further heavy and persistent rain to come over parts of northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland and southern Scotland on Thursday. There's a Met Office warning in place for parts of northeast England where that rain could cause some further disruption. In the south, turning a little brighter and a little milder.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Queues forming for the westbound M62 with still blocked junction 27 Gilderson to chain bar 26. A vehicle fire there. Currently, 3 of the 4 lanes are closed off, very slow on the approaches. Queues in South Wales as well for the M4 heading west to Newport. The Bringlass Tunnel westbound is closed off. The tunnel's been struck by a vehicle, so you're coming off at junction 25 westbound at Carleon. Is queuing back prior to 24 the Caldera. Temple Meet in Bristol, issues for the Clarence Road there. Now between the Bedminster Bridge roundabout and the Bath Bridge roundabout, it's been blocked and slow. Fire services there in attendance. And flooding in Blaby and Leicester means the Leicester Road, the 426, remains shut between Leicester Road and the Blaby bypass, naturally causing queues. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:40. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now let's cross live now back to Liverpool, where GB News presenter Tom Holwood joins me, of course, from the Labour Party conference. So what's the latest from the ground zero there? People still talking about the sausage gaff. Have they moved on?
Well, it's interesting. Some people seem to have noticed, others haven't. One party that definitely has noticed is the Conservative Party. They've already put out an attack video on Twitter using some music from Star Wars and the title screen, Return of the Sausages, as if it was one of those franchise films. But in more serious means, we're about to have a policy briefing from Keir Starmer's team, because this was a policy-heavy speech, talking about things that had already been done. Keir Starmer was boasting about the law that ends the ability of people to freely enter into fixed-term tenancy agreements, the so-called renters' rights, renters' reform bill. But he also spoke about ending the ban on onshore wind farms, on building more solar farms, all of the different areas where he believes his government has made a difference. That was a sort of Gordon Brown-like list of policy that kept being clapped and clapped and clapped. Spoke about Great British Energy being launched, spoke about renationalising the railways. But of course, there was lots there that he talked about doing in the future as well. And that's going to be the political challenge for this government. Can they deliver? Because certainly at the moment, what is swirling this party conference is the scandal, quite frankly. The negative headlines, the dip in the polls, the sleaze and donations and glasses for passes and all the rest of it, the party can only move past that if it's seen to deliver. That will be the fundamental challenge. It certainly should be easy to, with the scale of its majority in the House of Commons. There hasn't been this large Labour majority in the history of Parliament. It matches Tony Blair's majority, a slightly smaller number of MPs, but a larger majority because the difference of the size of the House of Commons, bit of trivia there. But clearly, what the Prime Minister will have to do is put the words in his speech into action. That's what we'll be watching. That's what we'll keep our ear to the ground about in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you, Tom Hall, for that update, and we'll cross back to you, of course, live throughout the show for more tidbits as you get them. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm still joined in the studio by the former editor of the Sunday Mirror and the political commentator Paul Connew and the political commentator John Oxley. Gentlemen, welcome back. Let's start with you this time, John. I wanted to pick up on the idea that Barry Gardner was discussing there with Tom Harwood earlier, and that is the notion of the Labour Party being nanny state. We saw about the smoking ban outside of pubs and football grounds, places like that. An idea was floated this morning, been refuted by Labour Party top brass already in the day, and that is the idea of forcing the pubs to close earlier on. Already a new nickname, No Beer Keir, to add to his list of names. Is there a feeling that we have got this sense where Sir Keir Starmer, before the election, said that the government would tread lightly on your lives? Now they're in power, it seems to be treading rather heavily.
Yes, and ultimately that's one of the things that the Labour Party believe in. They believe in lots of government intervention, and also they have a lot of lobbies talking to them, health lobbies, etc., who really push for these controls and are quite a powerful force in Westminster, whoever's around. We've seen it in the past with the Tories around smoking, but also things like the sugar tax, and it feels very much like a one-direction thing within government of these increased regulations, this increased pressure on public lives, and no one really turning around and saying, actually, is this necessary or is it proportionate and do we really want it?
And Paul, when Tom Hall was speaking to Barry Gardner, Barry was like saying, well, that presumably means you want to get rid of the seatbelt law, and you were nodding along vociferously. There's a world of difference between wearing a seatbelt in a car to protect your life and those of everybody else on the road and being told you can't have a pint after midnight.
This is going to be an interventionist government, which I largely agree with, not entirely. But smoking is dangerous, and the cost to the National Health Service of smoking-related illness is immense. If you want to have...
So is obesity. Where next?
Well, obesity again should be treated, but and should be. And lessons should be learned and campaigns launched. I don't particularly care.
The smoking isn't being treated.
I don't particularly care if people
banned.
stand in the middle of a field, in fact, smoking a cigarette. I don't smoke, but you can't have people where they could affect other people. And in pub, it depends how big a pub, as far as I'm concerned, how big a pub garden is. But if it's a fairly small garden and people are eating food, etc. Yeah, but I just think we've got to be careful. I mean, it's very easy for this Tory nanny state attack, but there are sensible elements of the nanny state, and some which go too far. And I agree with most of what Barry Gardner said.
So we're banning outdoor smoking. What next? What, we ban cars? Don't give them any.
We're not banning outdoor smoking.
What are they doing then?
They're banning outdoor smoking in fairly confined areas, like
pub gardens, outside football grounds. That's not a confined area.
It depends how big the pub garden is, doesn't it?
OK, well, do you think this is the sort of thing really that the public, the electorate want? As I said, my original point was Sir Keir Starmer threatened to tread lightly. This is the opposite. It's poking your nose in your smokes, poking your nose in your pints. Next, we're poking your nose in your red meat, your burgers. We already know they're poking their nose in our cars. This is precisely the kind of imposition that a lot of people feared would happen.
Yes, and most of all, it's a distraction. You know, one of the things that we see from Keir Starmer, and one of the things we see everywhere, is all this talk about these big problems that are besetting Britain, particularly around growth and wages being stagnant and the country not being rich enough. And part of that is the big drag of regulation, which makes things harder for business, makes it harder for individuals. And really, shouldn't the government be focusing more time on that than these, ultimately peripheral interventions? We don't necessarily know if these things do make anything better. They're not necessarily backed by serious science which shows that they will work, that shows that they will save this money. Why not back off?
No serious science on smoking? You're seriously saying that?
There's, of course, serious science that links it to illness, but there's not serious science that shows this particular intervention, reducing the amount of smoking in relatively open spaces, will have a meaningful impact on cancer rates across the board.
Got a call time there for now. Now, visa rule breakers to be banned from hiring foreign workers under a strict new migration plan, vows Sir Keir Starmer. Are you convinced he's the man for the job? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
But let's get stuck in. Prince Harry, he's consulted former aides about a possible partial return to the UK as he seeks to repair his public image, that is according to the Daily Mail.
Who wants him? I'm sorry. This is, of course, he's got his book Spare. The paperback comes out later this year. Now, he's not updating it, but he'll want to promote it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He says he's not doing any interviews, but we're talking about him now, we're talking about Spare.
Yeah.
And is he going to come back with his wife? What about the children? Because apparently it's not safe for his wife and children in this country, according to Harry, even though he took his wife to Colombia, which is much less safe than Britain, in my view.
It's absurd. Anyway, he was able to attend his uncle's funeral quite easily.
He did.
Nobody knew he was coming. He said
That's
he wasn't, and then he did. And he was perfectly safe.
And he would have had the same security as every other member of the royal family who attended that event.
Yeah.
But, of course, he didn't speak to his brother at the funeral.
No, he wouldn't, would he?
So if he's trying to fix it, honestly, a funeral is where you should put all differences aside because it's not about you. It's about respect to the person, the family of the person who's gone, which was his uncle. It was his... Diana's sister's husband had died. So, yet they didn't speak. They didn't speak in the church, they didn't speak when they left the church. Incredible, isn't it?
It's awful because that moment is when you realise that we are all mortal. And at that point, all other things should transcend that, but not...
Well, this move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In From the Cold, because apparently he's a bit fed up with his life in Montecito. Does that mean with his wife?
I don't know.
Oh, no. Apparently he's dissatisfied with advice from his American-based image expert.
Well, they've had about 10 of them, haven't they? They're on to their number 11.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
Welcome back, and let's cross back live now to Liverpool, where GB News' political editor Chris Hope joins me from the Labour Party conference. Chris, welcome to the show. What you got to tell us?
Hi
Hi, Martin. Yeah, well, I'm just straight out of that hall with Keir Starmer. I was struck by the language on immigration, which seems to have changed. I wonder if maybe they're watching GB News over in Labour High Command, saying they do recognise the need for control of immigration, that it's not necessarily a far-right issue. There is concerns. Of course, no one is allowing or approving or accepting violence, but at least accepting that there are concerns out there. And for the government to admit that you've got those falling people are signing up to apprenticeships while rising visas for those same jobs shows us a problem. I've been interviewing Yvette Cooper just now, Lisa Nandy, and she seems right on the same page as many of our viewers and listeners. So it seems to me there's a chance here this government is starting to listen to the concerns, the valid concerns of our listeners and viewers. I was struck also by the language on austerity. Now, we're told by the government there's no plan to return to austerity, but they're looking at that quote there from Keir Starmer, we're all in it together. Now, that was the same quote, the same highlight of a speech given by George Osborne at the height of austerity back in 2012. I just wonder whether at some point this Labour Party, this Labour government, may be subject to the criticism, aren't you a Tory party in disguise? I've talked to Sharon Graham, who leads the Unite Union. They are furious about this winter fuel payment being removed in November, as our viewers and listeners are, Martin, as you well know. And I wonder whether, despite all that rhetoric, it could be a problem here for this Labour government.
But I wonder if the "we're all in it together" line, Chris, tallies with the idea that Keir Starmer's getting 20 grand's worth of free suits, his missus getting 5 grand's worth of free frocks. People are still talking about those freebies, that discrepancy between the people in power with their snouts and the trough, pretty much the same as the Tories, and that's a world apart from those pensioners who yesterday were outside crying and screaming in the cold and the rain, Chris Hope.
That's right. I'm just checking on my phone here, Martin. I have asked Labour, I'm afraid I had to ask, where did Lady Starmer get her dress and did she pay for it? So far, no answer. I'll bring it to you when I get it. I know we are concerned about that because this idea of taking freebies is an issue. Earlier, we had the Labour MP for South Shields on the channel with Andrew Pearce, and she told us how she gives back freebies.
OK, Superstar Chris Hope will cross back to you live throughout the rest of the show for more reaction. And staying on the same point is the writing already on the wall for Labour's floundering government. Well, polling legend Sir John Curtis seems to think so, and he joins me next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, British News Channel. But now it's time for your weather. Here's Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your afternoon weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Should turn a bit drier for most overnights. Quite a chilly night across the north before further rain returns to southern areas tomorrow. All the heavy rain from the weekend and yesterday from this area of low pressure, that has cleared away and it's been much drier today across England. But we have seen further rain coming in across northern Scotland with a northerly wind, also feeling pretty chilly here. Smattering of showers elsewhere, but they're tending to fade, and many places, as I said, will have a dry night. With clear skies, going to turn quite chilly. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing that colder air, so likely to see a touch of frost, certainly across the mountains of Scotland. Towns and cities holding up a few degrees above freezing, and quite mild again in the south, where there will be quite a lot of cloud. And a bit of a grey start for southern counties of England. There'll be some rain here, and there will be more showers coming in across northern Scotland. But in these central parts, as I said, temperatures are going to be down close to freezing to start Wednesday. Should be some sunshine through the central belt, across southwest Scotland. Fine start for much of Northern Ireland, just a few showers coming into the north coast. Quite a bit of cloud early on across parts of northern England, and quite a grey start across much of southern England and South Wales. Generally a dry start here, but things will change. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to see more rain pushing back in here as we go through the day, spreading across southwest England quite early on, and then into South Wales and later into the southeast of England and the Midlands. Across much of northern Britain, bar the odd shower here and there, many places actually dry and bright for most of tomorrow, but it will be on the cool side. Temperatures a touch below average, struggling into the teens. Further south, a little bit milder, but with the rain, it won't feel all that pleasant. And we're not done with the rain, far from it. Further heavy and persistent rain to come over parts of northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland and southern Scotland on Thursday. There's a Met Office warning in place for parts of northeast England where that rain could cause some further disruption. In the south, turning a little brighter and a little milder.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again to you. I'm Jules Buckley. The eastbound M8 Airdrie to Shotts, that's junction 6 to 5, is queuing. A collision there means the road is part blocked. Still big queues westbound for the M62. Now, the outside lane is the only one open. That's lane 4, Gilderson to Chain Bar, junction 27 to 26. So 3 lanes out for an earlier car fire. The queue is back to Tingley at junction 28. A couple of issues for the northbound M6. Firstly, if you're heading around Crewe, 16 up to 17, a breakdown blocking a lane. Also northbound, just between the Corley services and the M6 toll at 3A, a lane shut for a bump there. That's causing delays. Westbound M4 in South Wales to Newport, all back open at the Brynglas tunnels, but still queuing. And the anti-clock M25, all lanes back open following a breakdown after Enfield 25, still queuing though in the roadworks.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Sir Keir Starmer today addressed the Labour Party conference and offered homes for heroes, a Hillsborough law, and even demanded a return of the sausages from Hamas. Now, the big question is, was it a banger of a speech or was there little meat on the bone? We'll have full analysis from top experts throughout the show. But clearly not everybody enjoyed Sir Keir Starmer's speech, as he was, as you'd imagine, heckled. A pro-Palestine protester was ejected after interrupting his speech. And is it time for No Beer Keir? Well, first we had two-tier Keir, then it was free gear Keir. But is it next time for No Beer Keir? Well, because today rumours were rife that Labour might close the pubs early to tackle harmful drinking. Is this more nanny state nonsense? And top pollster Sir John Curtis has already claimed that the writing is already on the wall for Labour's floundering government, pointing to Sir Keir Starmer's tanking personal popularity and the PM's poor political antennae. Later in the show, we'll be joined by the legend that is Sir John Curtis. I demand the return of the sausages. A soundbite which may well haunt Sir Keir Starmer for some time, but putting that to one side, there was a lot of meat on the bone. Today, a lot of policy came out. Homes for Heroes would no doubt catch the eye of GB News viewers, offering homeless veterans, armed service veterans, homes, as well as domestic abuse survivors and young carers. A Hillsborough law, and also a lot of tough talk, again, calling those riots and those protests across Britain as racist, as thuggish. Get in touch with your views. If you caught Sir Keir's speech, let me know your favourite bits. Was it meaty, or does he deserve to get battered for it? GBNews.com/you'll say. Now, to your headlines, here's Sophia Wensley.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 4 o'clock. These are your headlines. Change has begun. That's a message from Sir Keir Starmer as he gave his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister this afternoon. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctors' strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed will be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. He also defended winter fuel payment cuts, saying every pensioner will be better off. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK, sparked by the Southport stabbings.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, but we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary says Labour is a party of law and order, vowing to crack down on street crime, targeting offenders like street drinkers and shoplifters. Opening the third day of Labour conference in Liverpool, Yvette Cooper's pledged to introduce Ronan's Law, banning ninja swords, which earned her a standing ovation. She also promised buffer zones around abortion clinics and reiterated Labour's plan to halve knife crime in a decade. She went on to condemn riots in the Southport after the deaths of 3 girls, calling the violence a disgrace, and slammed the Conservatives as right-wing wreckers who sow division.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime.
And there's been disruption at the Labour Party conference as 2 Youth Demand supporters spray-painted the words Genocide Conference at the entrance. The protesters, calling for an arms embargo on Israel and a halt to new UK oil and gas licences, were arrested after being tackled by police. The incident happened this morning outside the security check-in at the conference in Liverpool. Now, in other news, the Defence Minister, John Healey, is expected to chair an emergency Cobra meeting to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East, while the Prime Minister has called for restraint and de-escalation. It comes as Israeli airstrikes continue to hit Hezbollah positions, including missile launchers and weapons depots. At least 550 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. 500,000 people have fled southern Lebanon. Airlines have cancelled dozens of flights, and Lebanese hospitals are overwhelmed with more than 1,800 wounded. The UK and US have both now advised nationals to leave the region. Now, back in the UK, the government says securing an agreement with striking nurses is an essential step to restoring public services after they turned down a 5.5% pay rise. 2/3 of Royal College of Nursing members voted against the deal in a record turnout of 145,000. Labour Minister Pat McFadden insists the government understands the challenge of balancing public spending while trying to treat workers fairly.
Prospects for the country are great. Britain's a great place in which to invest, and if we can get that message out and get that going, then we can generate the wealth that we need to make people better off and to fund the public services that we all depend on. And the 2 parts to that story are going to be at the heart of the Prime Minister's speech this afternoon.
However, Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Atkins claims the Labour government has lost control of the public sector pay. She told us the pay rise given to junior doctors could have repercussions for nurses and other healthcare professionals.
It would have impacts on other healthcare professionals, including nurses and midwives, who would ask quite reasonably, well, what value does this government put on us? And we are now seeing the longer-term consequences of that short-term decision he made in July to award that inflation-busting pay rise to junior doctors with no reform, such as I had with consultants, no improvements to productivity, and sadly, we're now seeing the ramifications of that.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, what a lot of meaty politics we've got to tuck into today. Let's get stuck in. So, Sir Keir Starmer has been addressing the Labour conference and offered homes for heroes, a Hillsborough law, and also demanded the return of sausages from Hamas. Let's take a look.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
So the return of the sausages. The big question now is, was it a banger of a speech or was there little meat on the bone? Well, later on in the speech, he was also interrupted by a pro-Palestine protester.
Got a pass from the 2019 conference. We've changed the party.
Well, it may have been a pre-prepared joke, but it hit the spots because Sir Keir Starmer laughed off the minor interruption and said that this chap has a press conference to the 2019 conference. That was a dig, of course, at his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn. Now, moments after the speech, our political editor, Christopher Hope, accosted some top Labour politicians and asked them about some of the policies the Prime Minister announced.
Well, it was having a very honest conversation with the public, both about the difficult economic decisions that we're going to have to take in the short term to improve their lives in the long term, but also about the problems that have been ignored and overlooked far too many times. It spoke very directly to me, the part about immigration, because in Wigan there are lots of people who are concerned about uncontrolled immigration. They're not racist, but they do want to know that we have a plan. And that means accepting people have valid asylum claims and welcoming to this country, and it means getting a grip on the huge asylum backlog, making sure those claims are processed fast and that people are returned if they don't have a right to be here.
Well, we've been clear that net migration needs to come down. It has trebled over the last few years. You know, that's been driven by a huge increase in overseas recruitment at the same time as training has been cut. So what you heard Keir Starmer saying today is net migration must come down as training for our young people, this kind of skills and opportunities, needs to increase.
Yeah, it was a very emotional moment for myself and the Mayor of Liverpool, Steve Rotherham. Yeah. We exchanged a look or two because we launched the Hillsborough Law Now campaign in Manchester, actually, a couple of years ago, and it's built to this day. It's not us, it's the people of Liverpool, supported by everyone in the North West, who's taken this...
Well, Lisa Nandy there and Yvette Cooper sounded very much like they've been watching GB News. Something has sunk in. And moments ago, Tory leadership contender Tom Tugendhat reacted to the speech and he had this to say.
Look, that was a banger of a speech, but he can't even cook up a decent line. I mean, the problem is he's really made a complete hash of it, hasn't he? And none of it's worked out at all. All he's done is he's demonstrated the arrogance of somebody who simply can't deliver. Frankly, he's fried the whole thing in bananas and made a complete mess of it.
And I wonder how many more puns we're going to be able to get in before the day is out about chip shops. Let's cross live now to Liverpool, where our political editor Chris Hope joins me live with the Labour MP Lucy Rigby. Chris, what's the latest reaction on the ground there to Sir Keir Starmer's banger of a speech?
I couldn't quite believe Tom Tugendhat's attempt to make an entire three-course meal out of saying the wrong words, sausages or hostages on air. With me now is Lucy Rigby from Northampton North MP, newly elected.
Hi, Chris.
Is that a problem? I mean, I was in the hall, all the applause meant I couldn't hear what he was saying. So on TV, he was saying the words sausages, not hostages.
Yeah, look, I didn't hear it in the hall. If he did, it's clearly a slip of the tongue. But
yeah.
Otherwise, Chris, there are plenty of other bangers in the speech that hopefully, hopefully we're going to come into. Yeah.
He seems to have had some kind of conversion on the issue of immigration. He recognises there are concerns about it, an issue we've been talking about a lot on GB News for our listeners and viewers. What prompted this?
I think he's always recognised that there are concerns about immigration, as there are across the country. Now, I speak to plenty of people in Northampton who've got concerns about immigration. But what the Prime Minister was talking about today was linking migration policy to skills, which is really obviously what we need to do, working with the Migration Advisory Council to do that and fill the skills gaps.
And to hear that there's some falling off in apprenticeships at the same time as visas granted for those jobs are going up, there's clearly something not working in the system, isn't it?
Well, because the Prime Minister was talking about apprenticeships today and this new foundation apprenticeship, which I was really pleased to hear about. The skills agenda is clearly absolutely integral to growth. But look, overall, I think this is a really passionate, determined speech from the Prime Minister, setting out the better Britain that this Labour government's going to build, and there's plenty in there that my constituents in Northampton North will want to hear about. So better public services, a growing economy, rising living standards, giving people more money back in their pocket. That's what people want to hear about.
He mentioned there we will all want lower taxes, but that's not going to happen in the budget on October 30th, is it?
Well, he was talking about giving people more money back in their pocket, and if we can, make energy bills lower, if we can do things that help on the cost of living crisis, grow the economy and raise living standards, then that will give more people more of their own money back to spend.
Do you worry that you might be accused of being the Tories in disguise? Now, I say that because you're cutting benefits for 10 million pensioners. He said in his speech there that we are all in it together. That's exactly the language used by George Osborne in the 2012 conference for the Tory party at the height of austerity. So he says on the one hand we're not going towards austerity, but on the other hand he's talking the language of the Tory party.
I'm not worried that we're anything like the Tories, and we're just frankly not. I mean, when George Osborne said that we're all in it together, the irony was that we really, really weren't.
Yes.
And people got that we weren't. That's why it was such a ridiculous thing to say.
But we're not now either. You're taking benefits away from pensioners, and some of your colleagues are getting free clothes.
Well, no, we're restricting the winter fuel allowance to people on pension credit. That's what we're doing. But we are all in this together. This is going to be, this was the subject matter of the Prime Minister's speech today. He's giving everyone a stake in this new, better Britain that we're building.
Is the government now moving past the row about donated spectacles and clothing? And should the people who receive freebies give them to charity? Emma Lewell-Buck, your colleague in South Shields, she gives all the things she gets to charity.
I think we've moved past that, and I was really pleased that today, as I said, the Prime Minister's, we're now talking about the things that really, really matter to my constituents in Northampton North. And when I go out knocking on doors, as I have done since the election, obviously did it all throughout the election and the 2 years before that as well, what people talk about is the grandmother that's had her hip operation cancelled twice because of the shortage of doctors, the NHS waiting list being as they are, the fact of, the standards in our schools. This is what people talk about. They're not, that's what they want to hear about.
Those need fixing. Do you worry about the nanny state going too far with this government? Reports today that pubs may close early to stop us drinking so much, banning smoking or vaping in pub gardens. Are you comfortable with those policies?
I don't worry about us being a nanny state. I don't think that's where this Labour government is. I don't think that's the direction that the Prime Minister or the Secretary of State for Health want to take us in.
And what's the main message coming out from the hall today? One of service, he kept talking about that, and country before party.
Yeah, definitely country before party. And we've had 14 years of the Tories acting in a narrow party interest. That gave us short-termism, weak investment, anemic growth in the economy. Yeah. And this is a government that's talking about the national interest and growth in our economy, rising living standards. But look, I thought today it was a really passionate speech, but it was a really determined speech as well, because the Prime Minister was saying that some of this stuff's not going to be easy, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we're going to get there.
And we're 10 weeks into a 5-year government, or 4 or 5 year government.
Right.
Net migration, he wants to control that, bring it down. What numbers are you happy with? Tens of thousands?
I don't think we've put a number on it.
I know you haven't, that's why I'm asking.
Well, indeed, I'm not going to put a number on it right now.
You can, go on.
No, I can't, and I won't. I don't think that's sensible. The sensible thing to do is to look at the skills gaps and link migration policy to skills. And I think that if you ask people across my constituency, that is what they would say is the sensible thing to do.
Well, Lucy Rugby, thank you for joining us today on GB News. And there you have it, Martin. They're quite relaxed here, the new Labour MPs. They think that their leader has done pretty well there. He has set out a new prospectus on immigration, but also the language of the Tory party back in 2012. That will ruffle the feathers of some of those here.
And Chris Hope, we've had some very amusing reaction from our GB News viewers here saying, first, it's no beer care, then he wants the sausages returned. How long before that happens in my local chip shop? Chris Hope, thank you very much. Excellent, as ever there. We'll cut back to you later in the show, of course. Now, let's get some more reaction on that Sir Keir Starmer speech. Did he look confident delivering his major keynote speech this afternoon in Liverpool? Well, joining me now is the body language expert, Darren Stanton. Darren, welcome to the show. So you make a living out of micro-analysing the body language of people when they give speeches. Sir Keir Starmer, of course, not renowned as being the most natural orator out there. He's no Tony Blair, that's for sure. Started this speech today very, very nervous, on a back foot, about the free gear, about the winter fuel allowance, about cronyism. Tell me, Darren, how do you think he performed?
I don't think he was as confident as he would like to have been. The first thing that struck within the first sort of 10 seconds of the speech was the fact that he had what we call a masking smile, and that's almost like a disingenuous smile, which is masking nerves and lack of confidence. And the way we see that is the bottom half of the face was smiling, but we're looking for something called crow's feet or laugh lines, and that they're engaged when someone's actually displaying a genuine emotion. So in my mind, straight off the bat, he wasn't feeling that confident straight away of delivery.
Do you think he was soon back on home turf, though? I mean, this was about an easier speech as you're going to get, right? It's like making a best man speech. It's a room full of people who support you. It's a room full of people who are waiting to laugh at your first joke. It's about as easy as it gets. On that basis, do you think he did well, or do you think he was pretty lacklustre?
Well, that's actually a word I used earlier on in the interview. But I think, look, as you already touched upon, this is a man that's never going to have the charisma of somebody like, Barack Obama, for example. He was a great orator. So I think he started off relatively at a good pace, but for me, it went downhill quite rapidly. He's quite slow in his speech. I think it's almost like being caught again. So I think a lot of the ways he phrased things, the same old kind of tied phrases, run it together, and country first. We've already heard it all before. Another thing I noticed is that I think the thing for me was that the most genuine parts of what he said was when he was speaking about family, because one thing we look for is an emotional shift, and he went from looking at the audience to looking down and right. So that tells me, obviously, when he went off at a tangent about going to the Lake District, that was kind of quite emotive for him. But I think everything else, for me, didn't really hit what it needed to hit. And he may have got 4 standing ovations, but I don't think the electorate have kind of been sold on it personally.
And Darren Stanton, he managed to get through the entire speech without making reference to his dad being a toolmaker. No doubt a lot of the electorate and the viewers were sighing a sigh of relief. No doubt a lot of people in the hall were too. He then went off on a bit of a ramble about him playing the flute and being into music when he was a kid. Darren, is that a typical reaction of somebody who's a bit nervous? Say they start waffling about stuff which might seem important to them, but really the audience is rolling their eyes and going, what's this fella on about?
Absolutely. I think it's an anxiety to communicate and to connect with the people you're talking to. And as you said, I think sometimes people can kind of lose their thread and go off a completely different tangent. So I do feel that he was suffering massively from nerves. And yes, we're all human, but in that key position, you would have expected better, really.
And also, I think you're right, Darren, to make out, to reference to the constant referral to those sound bites, which I think a lot of us know, those are the emotional props of somebody who's feeling a bit nervous, right? So we had 14 years of chaos, I think about 6 times, working people endlessly on repeat, politics, a government of service. It's like, how many times are we going to hear that? That's the new Brexit, means Brexit. Fixing the foundations, party first, country second. Populism is a politics of easy answers. We've got a long-term plan. All of these, Darren Stanton, are props, aren't they, of people who are nervous, they're forgetting their way, and so they rely on these crutches to get them through to their next point.
Absolutely, they're like stepstones. So they're default kind of safety steps, if you like. I mean, I've assessed every head-to-head debate, for example, since 2010. And we've seen certain tells and gestures of other politicians, but I think certainly with the speech today, I think it's probably one of the worst I've seen.
Wow. So, Darren Stanton, you're an expert. So, judging on the delivery, the tone, the content, pitch perfect, marks out of 10 for Keir Starmer today?
Probably 4 or 5.
You're feeling generous there, Darren Stanton. Beautiful. Thanks for joining us. Body language expert, Darren Stanton. Thank you very, very much. I love that sort of stuff. Really, really interesting. Thank you. Now, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper today slammed the riots as racist thuggery. But would this really help to unite the nation? Or actually, is that sowing the seeds of division? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Bank Holiday Monday, we'll be celebrating National Dog Day by uncovering how many pet owners would rather spend the bank holiday with their pet over their partner. In fact, new research has uncovered the 5 key personas that make up Generation Pet. That's a new wave of post-pandemic pet owners, with 58% saying they worry about their pet being diagnosed with a serious illness. Well, joining us now to tell us more about how we should be caring for our pampered pooches is Dr. Edwina Gildia.
Some of the interesting facts coming through that is that 80% of us think that pet as part of the family. The new pet owners who have come on board during the pandemic, there's a lot to learn with being a new pet owner. Interesting facts, as you mentioned, 1/3 of pet owners are preferring to spend time with their pet this weekend over their partner. 60% of pet owners, and dog owners specifically calling them out, say that their dog improves their mental health, and 55% noting that improves their physical health by getting out and about.
It's also about showing that love and appreciation for these animals which don't ask anything of us but love.
That was another point that came through this research that we did at Zoetis UK, is that they bring a purpose to life, and I think that's another thing to call out. It's so important for ourselves, for society, to have that purpose, but with that comes responsibility. And that's ensuring that we do support their health, and we know how to do that as well.
If you'd rather spend your bank holiday with your dog than your partner, maybe we've got too much of an over-reliance on our pets.
I think it depends on what way you look at it. For some people, it may be a connection. I think it's a positive thing that we have, and we should celebrate it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, today slammed the recent riots, as racist thuggery, and claimed that both the Tories and the Reform Party are right-wing wreckers who sow division. So does such combative talk really help national unity, or is Miss Cooper the one sowing division? Well, I can now speak to our Home and Security editor, Mark White, for some more reaction to that. Mark, welcome to the show. I've got to say, a lot of people today were hoping we would encounter a Labour Party in a more receptive mood to try and get to the root origins of some of the frustrations people felt. And instead, we had this doubling down of a quite aggressive sentiment from both the Home Secretary, and then that was picked up by Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. Racism, thuggery, and there was no mood whatsoever to listen to the public about that.
Yeah, it was interesting to listen to Christopher Hope. There clearly is, on the part of the government, an acknowledgement of some tensions in communities around mass migration, and a determination, we're told, from the government to get those levels of net migration down. But then to use both the speech of the Home Secretary and indeed the Prime Minister to double down on their claims that the protests that turned to riots and saw, of course, hundreds of people arrested before the courts, many of them jailed, was all down to a minority of racist, far-right thugs, I think is just too simplistic. It doesn't really explore or acknowledge the real tensions that have been simmering in these communities for many years over, in particular, the issue of illegal migration and those coming across in small boats. But having said that, you know, that was still what Yvette Cooper and indeed Sir Keir Starmer were determined to hammer home. Have a listen to what Yvette Cooper said in part of her speech.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime.
See, my issue with that is that goes down very, very well at the Labour Party conference to a home crowd. But a lot of people will be watching this, looking for the future direction of the government. And Mark White, how many times have you and I spoken about the fact that the Labour Party reacted very, very differently in 2011 when we saw the riots in Tottenham? Yes, they came down hard on the rioters then too, 24-hour courts, as we saw post-Southport. But there was more of a receiver mode about let's try and grasp why people felt frustrated. 7 of the most deprived towns in Britain, Mark White, as you know, experienced those riots for good reason. They also had the highest proportion of asylum seekers across the United Kingdom. People felt that they weren't being listened to. They felt they were being treated like racists and like thugs. And now it's carrying on, Mark.
Yes, listen, there is no doubt that those that caused violence, that torched buildings and the like, that's got to be condemned. But anyone that knows about public order situations and the way these situations can evolve, yes, of course, there are always agitators, those that are spoiling for a fight in any public order situation, but they can never get the critical mass to turn into a riot unless there are many people on the streets. And the many people on the streets were people in those communities, people who were very angry and concerned about all of the issues that we've just spoken about that have been simmering for years. And yes, they can get caught up in the event, never meaning to set out to actually cause trouble, to take part in a riot, and they get caught up in the moment. It's to be condemned. But as I say, to come down with a simplistic interpretation of it, that they're all far right and they're all racist, is just wrong, when actually these communities also need to be listened to. And it's rather schizophrenic in a way that you got in the same speech the government acknowledging that there are clearly serious concerns across the country at the levels of net migration.
And Mark, there are a few platitudes today about, you know, we acknowledge that we need to get immigration down, talks about apprenticeship numbers falling at the same time as immigration visas being granted for certain skills. That might give us an idea of some policy to come. But there's nothing concrete today, Mark White, about border control. No concrete policy about anything that's going to be done about it. So a speech in that respect in immigration, high on rhetoric, little on detail.
Well, again, doubling down, Martin, on the issue about going after the criminal gangs. And we saw at the weekend arrests of 31 people. We're told that were linked to people smuggling operations. But these kind of arrests, that's law enforcement taking place in the UK and indeed overseas, was happening under the Conservative governments as well. There's nothing that I've seen that tells me at this early stage anyway that there is a massive effort to go after the people smugglers just yet. OK, to be fair to the government, we are less than 3 months in to the new Labour government, but there will only be so much time that people are prepared to give Sir Keir Starmer and his government to get the levels of illegal crossings, or as they call it now, irregular crossings of the English Channel down and stopped before there will be serious criticism of this government if they don't bring them under control.
Thank you, Mark White. And just to repeat, one of the biggest rounds of applause that Sir Keir Starmer got today was echoing the sentiment of Yvette Cooper. I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our communities. Thank you very much, Mark White. Excellent as ever. Thanks for joining us on the show. Now, moving on, still lots more to come between now and 5 o'clock. Is the writing already on the wall for Labour's floundering government? That's next with the one and the only pollster, Sir John Curtis. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sophia Wesler.
It's 4:32. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Change has begun. That's a message from Sir Keir Starmer as he gave his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister this afternoon. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctors' strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed will be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. He also defended winter fuel payment cuts, saying every pensioner will be better off. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK, sparked by the Southport stabbings.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, and we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
But the speech didn't go completely smoothly, with the Prime Minister making an embarrassing gaffe when referring to the return of hostages in Gaza. He said sausages instead.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
Look, that was a banger of a speech, but he can't even cook up a decent line. I mean, the problem is he's really made a complete hash of it, hasn't he? And none of it's worked out at all. All he's done is he's demonstrated the arrogance of somebody who simply can't deliver. Frankly, he's fried the whole thing in bananas and made a complete mess of it.
Conservative leadership candidate Tom Tugendhat speaking there. Now, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, is expected to chair an emergency COBRA meeting to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East, while the Prime Minister has called for restraint and de-escalation. It comes as Israeli airstrikes continue to hit Hezbollah positions, including missile launchers and weapons depots. At least 550 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. 500,000 people have fled southern Lebanon, airlines have cancelled dozens of flights, and Lebanese hospitals are overwhelmed, with more than 1,800 wounded. The UK and US have now both advised nationals to leave the region. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your afternoon weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Should turn a bit drier for most overnights. Quite a chilly night across the north before further rain returns to southern areas tomorrow. All the heavy rain from the weekend and yesterday from this area of low pressure, that has cleared away and it's been much drier today across England. But we have seen further rain coming in across northern Scotland with a northerly wind, also feeling pretty chilly here. Smattering of showers elsewhere, but they're tending to fade and many places, as I said, will have a dry night. With clear skies, going to turn quite chilly. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing that colder air, so likely to see a touch of frost, certainly across the mountains of Scotland. Towns and cities holding up a few degrees above freezing, and quite mild again in the south, where there will be quite a lot of cloud. And a bit of a grey start for southern counties of England. There'll be some rain here, and there will be more showers coming in across northern Scotland. But in these central parts, as I said, temperatures are going to be down close to freezing to start Wednesday. Should be some sunshine through the central belt, across southwest Scotland. Fine start for much of Northern Ireland. Just a few showers coming into the north coast. Quite a bit of cloud early on across parts of northern England, and quite a grey start across much of southern England and South Wales. Generally a dry start here, but things will change. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to see more rain pushing back in here as we go through the day, spreading across southwest England quite early on, and then into South Wales and later into the southeast of England and the Midlands. Across much of northern Britain, bar the odd shower here and there, many places actually dry and bright for most of tomorrow, but it will be on the cool side. Temperatures a touch below average, struggling into the teens. Further south, a little bit milder, but with the rain, it won't feel all that pleasant. And we're not done with the rain, far from it. Further heavy and persistent rain to come over parts of northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland and southern Scotland on Thursday. There's a Met Office warning in place for parts of northeast England where that rain could cause some further disruption. In the south, turning a little brighter and a little milder.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello again to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Still some long queues for the westbound M62 as an earlier car fare still gets recovered. So junction 27 at Gilderson to Chainbar, junction 26 still struggling. Heavy back towards Tingley still at junction 28. A route through Birstall and Birkinshaw also slow as traffic avoids that issue on the westbound M62. Queues north for the M6 between the Corley services and the M6 toll at 3A. A lane closure still in place. A collision there's causing delays. There's a broken down truck on the southbound M23. Lane 1's coned off Gatwick Airport at 9, down towards Crawley at 10. And if you're heading towards the Dartford Tunnel, anti-clock M25 still queuing following an earlier breakdown. All the lanes are back open. However, patchy queues back towards the Dartmouth interchange there at junction 2. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, newly elected governments usually enjoy an electoral honeymoon. But is it already over before it's begun for Sir Keir Starmer's Labour government? Well, pollsters are saying that the writing is already on the wall for his floundering government, and that's despite the cheers he got during his speech at the Labour Party conference earlier on today. Well, joining me now is the Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, Sir John Curtis. Sir John, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So you wrote an excellent piece in The Telegraph yesterday evening called "The Writing is Already on the Wall for Labour's Floundering Government." You talk about Sir Keir Starmer's loveless landslide already evaporating away. Tell us more.
Yeah, I think to some degree you're quoting the headlines rather than necessarily what I wrote. But anyway, I was making two crucial points that perhaps are underappreciated. The first is that despite Labour's very large parliamentary majority, they only got 35% of the vote. Outside of Scotland, their share of the vote barely increased. And it looks as though the principal motivation as to why voters voted for them is not because they were fallen in love with Labour, but rather they were keen to get rid of the Conservatives. And at least in constituencies where Labour was starting off second to the Conservatives, that is what they did. But that does therefore mean that there's a relatively small section of the electorate that are out there willing this government to succeed. Most people didn't vote for it, and therefore we shouldn't be surprised that the public perhaps begin to regard it fairly critically relatively early on. That's point one. Point two is that Sir Keir Starmer has never succeeded in making himself popular with the general public. That was true all the way through up to polling day. It was then true after the election. He got something of a bounce in the wake of his electoral success, unsurprisingly. But what we've discovered is in the course basically of 2 months is that his numbers have returned to, at minimum, no better than they were before the election, if according to some pollsters, slightly worse. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the problem here? Well, the problem here, I think, is that what the last few weeks have revealed is that some of the weaknesses that probably underlay those relatively poor ratings for Sir Keir Starmer before the election have also now been exposed very clearly afterwards. Weakness number one is that he does find it difficult to lay out a narrative or to do the vision thing, to give a sense of direction as to where his party is going to go. In the election, it was about change. It was, at the beginning of this conference, change begins. Well, now apparently change has begun. Now, to give him credit in his speech today, I think he got himself a strap line, which is Britain belongs to you. The question is whether or not he laid out enough in that to begin to generate a deal of excitement about his premiership. Because in many respects, the speech today was about, well, I'm going to provide you stable government. Yes, you're going to be a bit better off. The public services are going to work. But it wasn't necessarily there with the tone of excitement. But we'll have to see. Point one is, anyway, so far, not a popular politician. Surprise, surprise, as Prime Minister, he's not a popular politician. Number two is his political antennae are not always adequately sharp. And we've seen that after the election in the way they failed to pick up quickly enough the fact that the various gifts of hospitality and clothes, etc., whatever the rules say, were not going to be a good look, particularly given, of course, the Labour Party fairly mercilessly attacked the Conservative government for allegations of sleaze when they were in opposition.
And also the particular political antennae, not only out of tune with the nation, but his own party in particular. The cronyism scandal, which seems to have been, there's no change. There's continuity with the Labour Party, and the free gear scandal. No, they're all the same. They've all got their snouts in the trough. And then we saw yesterday, Sir John, outside the Labour Party's own conference, a protest from Unite, the biggest supporter, the biggest union, around the winter fuel allowance. A lot of people, even within the Labour Party electoral circle, think that's a very conservative type austerity, George Osborne, quite mean-spirited policy. And a poll out today putting Starmer's personal popularity as plunging from plus 71.
Further evidence to add to what I've already talked about. I think the problem with the cronyism and the gifts, etc., is that, of course, Sir Keir Starmer said, I'm going to improve trust. We are going to keep to the rules. And the problem is, therefore, is that inevitably this has given both Conservative politicians and journalists, quite reasonably, an opportunity to test the government on that criterion in much the same way as when Rishi Sunak, when he first became Prime Minister, said, I'm going to provide you with integrity. And then there were question marks about how far he succeeded. The honest truth is, the advice to politicians of all stripes is not to set yourself up as necessarily holier than thou, because it nearly always becomes unstuck. And that is the risk that Sir Keir Starmer has taken. On the Winter Fuel Alliance, well, I mean, certainly this is one of the reasons why people have been complaining that this government has come up with lots of bad news, that it's not entirely clear that this particular cut was necessarily the only solution to the 22 billion problem that the government claimed there was in terms of the finances this year. Indeed, it only saves just about over 1 billion. And again, that's a question, therefore, again, of the politics, at least, not necessarily looking right. And I think what we have to understand about Sir Keir Starmer, he was talking this afternoon about laying out the tough choices. Well, yeah, sure, life is about tough choices. Politics often, however, is about trying to persuade people you've made the right choice, and not always being entirely honest about the cost. Well, we'll wait and see whether Sir Keir Starmer's perhaps more technocratic approach, as opposed to what some people regarded, for example, as the boosterism of Boris Johnson, proves to be more successful. It's certainly not an easy sell. We'll have to see whether or not he can make it a successful sell.
And Sir John, in terms of the opportunity for this disenfranchisement with other political parties, where do you see the votes if people who lent their vote to the Labour Party, perhaps those red wallers who lent their vote to the Conservatives last time, where do you see the most opportunity for other parties drifting away from Labour?
Well, that is the $64,000 question about the outcome of the 2024 election. Sure, we are, I think implicit in your question is that we can't necessarily assume that the Conservative Party, at least in current circumstances, would necessarily be the party to whom voters turn if they're disenchanted with Labour. Indeed, the polls that have found some decline in Labour support, even below the 35% they got in the election, suggest that all of Reform, the Greens, and the Liberal Democrats have had some gains in the wake of Labour's difficulties. And the truth is, it will depend very much on the willingness of the leaders of those parties to frame a critique of the government, insofar as the government is not doing as well as people want, that persuades people that they provide an alternative. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if in the end all of these parties gain to some degree, because we are, I think, potentially looking at a more fractured British politics going forward, in which we certainly cannot assume that the battle is any more simply between Conservative and Labour, but that Labour, for example, even if they can avoid losing too many votes to reform, they do have to worry about the Greens. That's a clear lesson of the election. And they do also potentially have to worry about the Liberal Democrats. There are other places that voters can go, even if they are unhappy with both Labour and the Conservatives.
And so, John, just quickly before we have to sadly leave you, you talk in your article about other prime ministers who have had much better ratings after their elections, going back to Blair and the coalition and Boris Johnson in 2019. So it seems that Sir Keir Starmer is having a particularly tough time in his very short honeymoon period compared to some in more recent history.
Sure. The point is that Sir Keir Starmer entered 10 Downing Street as an unpopular politician. There was, as I said, that short-term boost. Things have simply returned to where they were, but that does put him in contrast with Tony Blair or David Cameron or even Boris Johnson, at least amongst Leave voters, where they were already relatively popular, particularly Tony Blair, and they were then able to maintain that popularity after the election. Because Sir Keir Starmer's degree of popularity immediately after election was so short-term, we shouldn't be surprised that it's disappeared very rapidly. But in a sense, it simply exposes the fact he is, in a sense, he's entered 10 Downing Street more unpopular than any recent prime ministers has proven to be.
So, John Curtis, fascinating stuff. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show once again today. Superb. Thanks for joining us on the TV. Now, we'll be crossing back to Liverpool for the latest reaction to the Prime Minister's speech at the Labour Party conference shortly. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On Tuesday, the 3rd of September, at St Paul's Church in Wilton Place in London, a lucky few will sing highlights from Mozart's Don Giovanni in front of a paying audience with an orchestra and under the baton of Gary Matthewman, the conductor and artistic director of Brunswick Vocal Arts. Why is it important that young singers have this opportunity with an orchestra?
There's a gauntlet, if you like, that I think lots of young singers have to run between finishing the relative comfort of their conservatoire education and becoming firmly established as professional singers. Lots of the ones who show real verve and real promise and work really hard end up for a little bit too long being trapped in a kind of cycle of being the understudy. But some of them are ready to kind of go that extra mile and reach that next milestone. And we as a charity thought, well, what a lovely thing it would be to handpick some of these best young singers, give them intensive coaching on the role that they're going to perform, give them the chance to work with professional players for the first time, and crucially, have the thing professionally filmed and recorded. Because the first question all young singers are asked when they meet somebody influential now is, well, what's your website? Or
you have coached the singer, coaching the singer either towards a recital or towards their performance, their part in an opera. Tell me a little bit about that process.
It's a case of asking them questions which make them bring a character to life, so that when an audience member witnesses this person singing, they don't just think, oh, that's a pretty noise. They think, oh, there's something going on here that I recognise. And especially in a context like this, which is related, I think, to when people sing recitals. Say they sing 20 songs in that one evening, they've got to present 20 roles, 20 mini operatic roles, if you like. And we need to see the change in their bearing. We need to see the change in their approach to the text, as well as to the kind of the technical focus of their singing and how they produce sound.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi,
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, and let's cross live back now to Liverpool, where GB News presenter Tom Harwood joins me from the Labour conference. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, I am here at the main stage of the conference. The conference still continues even after the Prime Minister's speech, the speech which I've got here in my hand. I've been talking to some of his senior press people about this speech. We've had what's known in the business as a lobby huddle, asking questions about what exactly this speech meant, and particularly why there was so little policy in it. Normally we expect much more policy in a speech like the one given by the Prime Minister. But the answer of his team is that this is a speech about delivering what has already been promised, that there was the King's speech only some weeks ago, and they didn't want to put a whole deluge of new policy there rather than getting through what they have already announced. That being said, there was that one announcement on the homes for heroes, for carers, and for people who leave foster care and the like. That is a significant policy, but it isn't actually what it sounds like particularly. This is all about social housing, right? So this is veterans getting greater access to social housing. Turns out the detail of that policy doesn't actually raise up veterans up the list of the ranking in terms of achieving social housing. Instead, what it does is allow people to apply for or to get on those lists in the first place in areas that they're not local to. So that's a bit of the technicality behind it. What it should do, however, is give much greater access to social housing for veterans, for people who are leaving care and the like. Domestic abuse victims too. Those were the three categories. So that's some of the detail behind the speech. One more thing for you, Martin. We've been asking who paid for Keir Starmer's suit and Lady Victoria's dress. Now, we understand that it's a fairly expensive dress. There have been some reports in the press that it was borrowed. When I asked some of the spokespeople around the Prime Minister about this dress, what I was told is they simply weren't getting into it. I asked 3 times, and I wasn't, and they just wouldn't say whether Keir Starmer bought the dress, whether Lady Victoria bought the dress, whether a donor bought the dress, or whether it was borrowed. So that just seemed a very curious thing from the part of the people in the top team of this Prime Minister. I would have thought that they would have answered that and left fewer questions for people like me to ask.
Well, I think it's a problem they're just hoping will go away, Tom Howard, but of course it won't. Thanks for joining us, and we'll cross back to you later in the show. Thank you very, very much. Now, the Justice Secretary Shabnam Mahmood has unveiled a plan to shut women's prisons amid the overcrowding crisis. It's an astonishing thing. We'll have all the analysis next on that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now it's time for your web.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your afternoon weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Should turn a bit drier for most overnights. Quite a chilly night across the north before further rain returns to southern areas tomorrow. All the heavy rain from the weekend and yesterday from this area of low pressure, that has cleared away, and it's been much drier today across England. But we have seen further rain coming in across northern Scotland with a northerly wind. Also feeling pretty chilly here. Smattering of showers elsewhere, but they're tending to fade, and many places temperatures, as I said, will have a dry night. With clear skies, going to turn quite chilly. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing that colder air, so likely to see a touch of frost, certainly across the mountains of Scotland. Towns and cities holding up a few degrees above freezing, and quite mild again in the south, where there will be quite a lot of cloud. And a bit of a grey start for southern counties of England. There'll be some rain here, and there will be more showers coming in across northern Scotland. But in these central parts, as I said, temperatures are going to be down close to freezing to start Wednesday. Should be some sunshine through the central belt, across southwest Scotland. Fine start for much of Northern Ireland. Just a few showers coming into the north coast. Quite a bit of cloud early on across parts of northern England. And quite a grey start across much of southern England and South Wales. Generally a dry start here, but things will change. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to see more rain pushing back in here as we go through the day, spreading across southwest England quite early on, and then into South Wales and later into the southeast of England and the Midlands. Across much of northern Britain, bar the odd shower here and there, many places actually dry and bright for most of tomorrow, but it will be on the cool side. Temperatures a touch below average, struggling into the teens. Further south, a little bit milder, but with the rain, it won't feel all that pleasant. And we're not done with the rain, far from it. Further heavy and persistent rain to come over parts of northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland and southern Scotland on Thursday. There's a Met Office warning in place for parts of northeast England where that rain could cause some further disruption. In the south, turning a little brighter and a little milder.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. This two-lane still closed off eastbound M62. So Birchwood to the Eccles interchange. That's junction 11 to 12. There's a breakdown there. So the two inside lanes are full blocked, naturally causing queues. Still stop-start northbound M6, just away from the Corley services up towards junction 3A. That follows an earlier collision. All lanes are back open. There's been a bump on the westbound M4 just after Field at junction 12. Lane 1 still coned off to assist. It's still slow, as is the anti-clockwise side towards the Dartford tunnels on the M25. There's still flooding in many parts of England. In Bedfordshire, the A421 is currently shut between the Marshalls roundabout in Kempston and the M1 junction 13. And in Blaby and Leicester, the Leicester Road is currently shut just between the A426 and the Blaby bypass. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Desning on demand. Good luck.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Sir Keir Starmer today addressed the Labour Party conference and offered homes for heroes, a Hillsborough law, and demanded the return of sausages from Hamas. The big question is, was it a banger of a speech or was there little meat on the bone? We'll have full analysis. But clearly not everyone was enjoyed today's speech because Sir Keir Starmer was heckled. As you can see on your screens, a pro-Palestine protester was ejected after interrupting Sir Keir's speech. And first we had two-tier Keir and then it was free gear Keir. And now will it be no beer Keir? Well, because today rumours were rife that Labour might close the pubs early to tackle what they call harmful drinking. Is this more nanny state nonsense? And Home Secretary Yvette Cooper today slammed the riots as racist thuggery and claimed that both the Tories and the Reform Party are right-wing wreckers who sow division. Now, does such combative talk help national unity, or is Miss Cooper the one sowing the division? That's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. So, Sir Keir Starmer made a sausage-related slip-up earlier on. People saying he's the worst Prime Minister. He made a meal of it out of the frying pan into the fire. Insert your chip shop-related pun here. But a short while ago, Shabana Mahmood, who's the Justice Secretary, has given an astonishing speech saying she believes women don't belong in jail. And that's been followed up by calls to close down women's jails and send less women to prison. Can that be a good idea? Let me know your thoughts. Go to gbnews.com/you're saying. We'll be sure to be debating that later in the show. But now it's time for your headlines. Here's Sophia Wenzel.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines. Change has begun. That's a message from Sir Keir Starmer as he gave his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister this afternoon. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctors' strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed would be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. He also defended winter fuel payment cuts, saying every pensioner will be better off. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK, sparked by the stabbings in Southport.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, but we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
But the speech didn't go completely smoothly, with the Prime Minister making an embarrassing gaffe when referring to the return of hostages in Gaza. He said sausages instead.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
And it hasn't gone unnoticed, with Conservative leadership hopeful Tom Tugendhat saying Sir Keir Starmer simply can't deliver.
That was a banger of a speech, but he can't even cook up a decent line. I mean, the problem is he's really made a complete hash of it, hasn't he? And none of it's worked out at all. All he's done is he's demonstrated the arrogance of somebody who simply can't deliver. Frankly, he's fried the whole thing in bananas and made a complete mess of it.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary says Labour is a party of law and order, vowing to crack down on street crime, targeting offenders like street drinkers and shoplifters. Opening the third day of Labour conference in Liverpool, Yvette Cooper's pledged to introduce Ronan's Law, banning ninja swords, which earned her a standing ovation. She also promised buffer zones around abortion clinics and reiterated Labour's plan to halve knife crime in a decade. We've been speaking to people in Glasgow who've responded to the news on the buffer zones.
If they feel it's necessary. The example I heard this morning was if they had a young person who'd been involved in a rape sort of idea and they were choosing to abort the child and then facing all the people outside protesting.
Good. If people want to have that abortion, the right to an abortion, then I don't see why people should.
I believe it is a good thing because people have got to take a look at all these different safeguarding issues and what it can mean in the members of the community. And you don't want people to feel endangered or unsafe within any part of medical aspect.
Now, in other news, the Defence Secretary John Healey is chairing an emergency COBRA meeting to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East, while the Prime Minister has called for restraint and de-escalation. It comes as Israeli airstrikes continue to hit Hezbollah positions, including missile launchers and weapons depots. At least 550 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. 500,000 people have fled southern Lebanon Airlines have cancelled dozens of flights, and Lebanese hospitals are overwhelmed with more than 1,800 wounded. The UK and US have now advised nationals to leave the region. Now, back in the UK, a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed to death in southeast London has been named, while 2 men have now been arrested on suspicion of murder. The Metropolitan Police said the victim was Dejon Campbell, and his family are being supported by specialists. 2 men, aged 52 and 18, have been arrested and remain in police custody. And the government says securing an agreement with striking nurses is an essential step to restoring public services after they turned down a 5.5% pay rise. 2/3 of Royal College of Nursing members voted against the deal in a record turnout of 145,000. Labour Minister Pat McFadden insists the government understands the challenge of balancing public spending while trying to treat workers fairly.
Prospects for the country are great. Britain's a great place in which to invest, and if we can get that message out and get that going, then we can generate the wealth that we need to make people better off and to fund the public services that we all depend on. And the 2 parts to that story are going to be at the heart of the Prime Minister's speech this afternoon.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has been addressing the Labour conference today and offered homes for heroes, a Hillsborough law, and also demanded the return of sausages from Hamas. Let's take a look.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
As you'd imagine, he's being absolutely panned for that. He's getting a battering. But was it a banger of a speech, or was there little meat on the bone? Well, Tory leadership contender Tom Tugendhat wasted no time to steam in with his pun-related attack. Here's what he had to say.
That was a banger of a speech, but he can't even cook up a decent line. I mean, the problem is he's really made a complete hash of it, hasn't he? And none of it's worked out at all. All he's done is he's demonstrated the arrogance of somebody who simply can't deliver. Frankly, he's fried the whole thing in bananas and made a complete mess of it.
I think Tom needs a better scriptwriter, more jokes, I would say. Let's cross live now to Liverpool, where our political correspondent Olivia Utley joins me now live from that Labour Party conference. Olivia, as you'd imagine, the mischief makers are enjoying Sir Keir Starmer's meat-based slip-up around the sausages being returned, but not the hostages. But tell me, what were the highlight standouts from the speech for you? What's the mood right there in the heart of the conference in Liverpool?
Leader speeches at party conferences are often pretty low on policy detail, but I think this one was particularly low. We heard about those homes for heroes getting veterans housed, although when pressed about it afterwards, it essentially seems as though what Keir Starmer's doing is moving veterans a little bit higher on a very long list of priorities for people who need social housing. So even that can't quite be explained as an example of a policy detail. He also talked about GB Energy in Aberdeen. Well, we were all expecting that, really, although the announcement did come with a huge round of applause. Rather than about policy detail, this seemed to be a speech about vibes. Keir Starmer's message that he wanted to get across, and that he did get across really, was that Britain now needs to take some very hard decisions on prisons, on taxes, on energy, on where to build pylons, etc. But if Britain does take those difficult decisions now, then in the future there will be a Britain that you can own again, that we can have again, was his message. Whether that will resonate with the public remains to be seen. He said it was trailed before the speech that this was going to be a sort of optimistic vision for the country after what we can only really call quite a lot of doom-mongering ever since he won the election back in July. There wasn't really that sort of nugget of optimism that people were perhaps looking for today. I also found it quite interesting the way that Keir Starmer didn't address at all that freebie scandal that has been engulfing the party in recent days. He talked for a moment about about those who are still hankering after a dramatic kind of politics, which he, Keir Starmer, has no interest in at all. Whether that was a reference to the fact that it's water off a duck's back, he used that phrase, whether it was water off a duck's back that he has been embroiled in this freebie scandal wasn't quite clear. But it did feel at some points as though he was burying his head in the sand. He was doing the conference speech for the conference that he was expecting rather than the conference that he is experiencing. And what is that conference? What is he experiencing? Well, it's not exactly the celebratory occasion that we would perhaps expect 3 months after this absolutely colossal Labour victory. The mood has been relatively muted, and that really is because of that damning poll just before, on the eve of conference, showing that Keir Starmer's popularity ratings had fallen to below Rishi Sunak's, and of course that scandal about freebies still engulfing the party, and that Sue Gray pay scandal, which is still lingering around too. The Labour Party doesn't feel as united as you might expect 3 months after winning power. All of that said, there was one clear message which Starmer wanted to get across: make the difficult decisions and we will reap the rewards in the future. And I think it's fair to say he did that today.
And Olivia Utley, it's interesting how both Sir Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, were slamming the riots as violent, racist thugs terrorising our communities. That was Sir Keir Starmer, and Yvette Cooper also saying they were racism, it was arson, it was thuggery. These protests were not about immigration. Certainly talking tough there. Olivia Utley, thank you very much for joining us live from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Now, we've got some breaking news for you now. Astonishing news. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has set out plans to slash the number of women going to jail, and ultimately even plans to close women's prisons as the country battles an overcrowding crisis. Astonishing developments. And I can speak now with GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, there have been so many conversations about two-tiered justice, two-tiered policing since the Labour Party came into power, and now we have it again. There's another tier of justice. You're going to get a much less likely to go to jail if you're a woman. They're closing women's jails. Why?
Well, if you listen to the Justice Secretary, she says that women are really being failed by the criminal justice system, that many women are in prison that shouldn't be in prison, and that once they're into the prison estate, then they are effectively on a road to reoffending. Their lives are criminalised, and they are then sort of doomed to that process of being, offending and returning to prison again. Family lives, she says, are destroyed. And if they can look for alternatives to prison that saves women from going to prison, obviously not for the most serious of offences, then that can keep families together. It can then prevent this kind of downward spiral of reoffending through the generations as well. But the same, to an extent, can be said for those in the male prison population. Having said that, this is what the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, said to the conference just a few minutes ago.
I believe that our justice system needs reform. And I believe that reform is most urgently needed when we consider the plight of women. Conference, the law has taken too long to address the realities of women's lives. Written mostly by men, the male experience is its default setting. And today, the law is still getting to grips with the reality of violence against women and girls. Consider, for instance, that 60% of victims drop out of rape cases before they go to trial.
So the Justice Secretary, I think there, Martin, very clear that she believes women are being failed. And, she has certainly got a point when it comes to sexual violence and domestic violence perpetrated against women, with many of these cases that just hang in the air. If prosecutors even go down the road of actually launching a formal charge and criminal court case, at the end of the day, it often takes so long before these cases get to trial that so many women are dropping out of that process. But I have to say, in terms of violence against women, you've got bizarrely a situation just in recent weeks where 1,700 male offenders were released from the prison estate to make way, to make space because of overcrowding there. Many of those, of course, repeat offenders and some sexual offenders, and indeed one man that was charged after leaving prison and allegedly going on to commit a sexual offence against a woman.
Mark, you're absolutely right. You know, we can all utterly condemn violence against women. Any right-minded person would, but that's not what this is about. This is about calling women's prisons desperate places. They hurt mothers. Well, they also hurt fathers. You can make the same argument that prison doesn't work for men. Why is it the Labour Party, the party of equality, the party of equal rights, is suddenly saying, oh, no, let's go softer on women. If they commit a crime, they shouldn't be going to jail. In fact, let's close the women's nicks and send men in there. Mark, that's not equality, that's sexism. It's favouritism.
Well, certainly, I think you're right to say that there are very serious issues within the male prison estate where we've got the levels of overcrowding that we've got, where we've got traditionally the programmes and the emphasis on rehabilitation that just can't really take place at the moment because of that very significant overcrowding, because of the cuts in the number of prison service personnel who are there to supervise these work programmes. That attention is just not happening. You've got male prisoners who are locked up for sometimes 23 hours in the day. It is little wonder that many of them behind bars are up to no good. When they come out, they are just in this perpetual cycle of reoffending.
And Mark, how long before men start saying, actually, I'm transitioning. I'm a woman prisoner now, therefore you can't send me to a jail. Mark White, an astonishing development. What a story, and I suspect one we'll talk about for many, many weeks and months to come. Mark White, fantastic. Thanks for joining us on the show. Well, what do you make of that? I think that's astonishing. Well, joining me now is the retired Scotland Yard detective, Mike Neville. See what Mike makes of this. Mike, I don't know how much of that you overheard. I'm simply astonished. This is an idea that's been around for a long, long time. The Labour Party say prison doesn't work for women. You could equally say prison doesn't particularly work for men, but sometimes you need a tough, short, sharp shock. What kind of message does it send out, Mike Neville, that for some reason, if you're a woman and you commit offence, you don't deserve to go to prison, you deserve preferential treatment?
Well, there is already some form of preferential treatment. When I used to be on a drug squad, if you raided a house, the man and woman would be engaged in the drug dealing, and basically the man would take the rap because you say, look, who's going to take responsibility here for dealing these drugs? And no man, really, no matter how wicked they are, wants to see their wife, partner or whatever, or the mother of their children, go to jail. So often women get a free pass there. But you've also got to remember here that 95% of violent crime is committed by men, and we really want prisons to protect us from violent men and also burglars. The vast majority of women are in for thieving and non-violent offences. So it is, if you're going to ration the prison places, it would be better to ration them for the women to save society. But all the time, though, what we see is that what that means, though, is that if you're a prolific shoplifter, you can think, well, I'm never going to go to jail because I'm a mum, and therefore continue on with it. So there must be a point in time where you say, no, that's enough. I know you've got kids, but it's the 100th shoplifting conviction or whatever you've got, you're going to jail. And I think this is sending a message that really, if you've got children, you've got a free get out of jail free card as you get in Monopoly.
That is absolutely the case, and we can all say that prison aren't places for any rational person to be. They're not fair, particularly if you're a parent. Beg your pardon, got sneezes there. I'm allergic to this story. On a serious point, we can all agree that prisons are no places for parents to be, but I think you raise a huge point there, Mike Neville. If you're a woman, if you're a mother, potentially you could say, well, I'll get pregnant, I'll avoid jail by any means necessary. And once you start closing down those women's prisons, I'm assuming they'll be converted into spaces for men because those are the prison spaces we need, and they're forever gone. What message does that send out to criminals, Mike Neville, if you're female?
It's just send this message that you've got a free pass. And we know that it's out of control with shoplifting. And people think, oh, shoplifting is a minor thing. But when it comes to the point, I spoke to two ladies in a shop near me, and people come in their shop, men and women, threatening them with needles, saying we know where you live, and stealing, money, monetary value in 10 minutes that these ladies work for 10 hours for. So when, working hard and paying your taxes becomes the stupid option, and being a thief is the sort of easy life, then society starts to break down. So there's got to be a point where people, whatever they've done, no matter what their circumstances, so you've got 15 kids at home, has got to go to jail. But ultimately with prison, my view is it's to protect us from wicked and evil people. And, I'm a realist as a man. Maybe it's a sexist thing to say, but the facts are that men are the wickedest and evil people when it comes to crime.
And it is worth pointing out, in defence of Ms Mahmood, that 2/3 of women are in prison for non-violent offences, that 55% of victims of domestic abuse, and that self-harm in women's prisons is 8 times higher than in the men's estate. So, of course, we should all be sympathetic to the needs of any prisoner. But Neville, my point is simply, does this send out a message that once again we have two-tiered justice, and you get a free pass from prison, you get a get out of jail card if you're a mum?
To a point, yes. And so there must be a point where if you're a prolific offender, and some of these people have got 10, 20, 30 convictions, there must be a limit at that point when you've committed 10 crimes that you go to jail. We have to have that, and there's no more excuses.
Okay, thank you, Mike Neville, and apologies for my sneeze. I got a bit carried away with the story. Now, I'll be crossing back to the Labour Party conference in Liverpool soon for all the very latest reaction. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle is finding it very, very difficult to recruit staff for her lifestyle brand, which is called American Riviera Orchard. There's a mouthful for you. Apart from a jam gifted to influencers earlier this year, the brand is yet to launch any products.
Well, let's speak to our US Royal and Showbiz reporter, Kinsey Schofield. Good morning to you, Kinsey. Who's going to want that gig?
I mean, there are rumors that Netflix has said, allow us to manage the retail strategy. If she can't manage to find a CEO or somebody willing to work with her, Netflix sees an opportunity there.
To be an influencer, people have got to want to be like you. Do people like her?
I mean, this has been her biggest issue in the last few years, is realizing that there's been a shift when it comes to their popularity. Harry and Meghan believed their own hype when they said on that Netflix series that the reason they were ostracized was because they were much more popular than the British royals. They were more popular than Prince William, more popular than Princess Kate. And their popularity has declined immensely. And now they are desperate to win people over again.
Most people have to be liked or admired, and I put it to you, Kinsey, she'll have difficulty on both fronts.
Netflix is not going to renew this contract. I mean, they are fearful that this cooking show, this polo show, will not connect with the audience. And now they want us to believe that Meghan is at home cooking all this banana bread and having her best friend Chrissy Teigen over for scones. People aren't going to buy it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has told the Labour Party conference that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it will mean short-term pain. Let's take a look.
This is how the work of change happens. A decisive mission-led government moving our country forward step by step, focused on a long-term plan. But first, we stabilise our economy. Second, we fix the foundation. And third, we build with pride and determination a Britain that belongs to you. But it will be hard. That's not rhetoric. It's reality.
Well, joining me now for some reaction is the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, who's live from the Labour Party conference up there in Liverpool. Peter, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. So Sir Keir Starmer is getting battered for his sausage slip-up. But aside from that, was there much meat on the bone policy-wise? One thing that really leapt out to us here at GB News was the Homes for Heroes initiative, putting veterans up the pecking order. But it appears on further analysis that's not actually the case. What stood out for you?
Well, the speech only finished an hour or two ago, so we've got to wait for a bit more of the policy detail. But being in Liverpool, that is the thing that has got people talking. The announcement about priority housing for victims of domestic abuse, care leavers and veterans. And I would defy anyone from across the political spectrum to disagree with any of that. But of course, for those with a long memory, it evokes a post-war Homes for Heroes campaign as well. But that was a standout announcement in a speech that I think was deliberately workmanlike, where they were trying to show they were low on rhetoric and they were getting on with the job.
There was a lot of talk about the riots again, and a lot of people on this channel were hoping there'd be some sort of receiver mode about trying to understand the communities behind this, what the reasons why they're frustrated, as we saw in 2011 with the Tottenham riots, when it was mostly the black community affected. That didn't happen, though. Sir Keir Starmer today, the biggest round of applause he got was when he called those a minority of violent racist thugs terrorising our community, echoing what Yvette Cooper said earlier in the day, saying also they were not protests about immigration, it was racism, it was arson, it was thuggery. Will that land well in the Red Wall? Is this really helping to unite the country, or is that further sowing the seeds of division?
I don't believe at all it will sow the seeds of division. It's the job of the Prime Minister to unite the country, but also to set direction and not just blow with the wind. And I think he did that, And I've campaigned in swing seats, particularly in places like Essex, where I hail from, and it's legitimate to have a discussion on the doorstep about immigration and the numbers, and he reflected that. Obviously, what is totally inappropriate, if not wicked, is to spread anti-Muslim hatred, use violence and use intimidation. And you're right that there was a wave of applause and some cheers for the language around the riots. And bear in mind, you've got an ex-public prosecutor in Keir Starmer addressing the country. It's perhaps the one day in the year when a party leader's guaranteed to get coverage among non-political people, and he's talking about clamping down on disorder and bigotry. And again, I don't think too many people can disagree with that.
Can I ask you about a story we just covered, an astonishing announcement from Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, saying she wants to close women's prisons?
Well, I've not seen all the details of that, but Lord Timpson, the new prisons minister, who doesn't come from party political background, he said many times that you've got a third of people in prison for very bad things, and then 1 to 2/3 more people who have mental health problems or other serious emotional and social and economic problems in life. We also know that a lot of women in prison are abuse victims themselves or have had very difficult upbringing. So there's always a temptation going back to the 90s for a politician to get on stage at conference and just say, we're going to lock them all up. But if that doesn't help cut crime, if prisons become academies of crime, this is no rehabilitation, if there's an extra cost to the taxpayer, that's not always a good thing. So I think we know that women, in particularly in prison, have had incredibly difficult lives, and it's a job of ultimately the Justice Department to try and reduce offending rather than just, quote unquote, banging people up because it will appease certain newspapers.
But Peter Edwards, Sir Keir Starmer banged a woman up very recently who was a sole carer for her elderly husband. That's because she posted a Facebook message he didn't like. This is just yet more two-tiered policing. You go to prison if you're a woman, if he thinks you're a far-right thug, but other ones he'll go soft on. It's just more two-tiered justice.
Well, I've not seen that story, but also Keir Starmer hasn't banged anyone up. You know, he's a Prime Minister, they're not involved in individual cases, and then obviously he was Chief Prosecutor. Well, again, is there anyone that didn't want to clamp down? If you had a riot in your neighbourhood, remember riots and criminality. But riots and criminality affect poorer communities more. Poorer people are more likely to be a victim of crime. Is there anyone that wanted a relaxation after the riots? No. Of course we wanted to see a clampdown on disorder. Disorder harms most communities, in particular poor communities. But we've got to keep reminding ourselves that it's independent judges without political affiliation who send people to prison. It's not Keir Starmer. It's not an elected politician.
Well, I think the clampdown came directly after direct orders from the Prime Minister. But Peter Edwards, thank you very much for joining us on the show there live from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Thank you. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including the dreadful news that boozers could be forced to shut early to target harmful drinking. More nanny state nonsense, is it, from No Beers Keir. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
It's 5:32. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. Change has begun. That's a message from Sir Keir Starmer as he gave his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister this afternoon. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctors' strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed would be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. He also defended winter fuel payment cuts, saying every pensioner will be better off. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK, sparked by the stabbings in Southport.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, but we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
Now, in other news, a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed to death in southeast London has been named, while 2 men have now been arrested on suspicion of murder. The Metropolitan Police said the victim was Dejon Campbell and his family are being supported by specialist officers. 2 men, aged 52 and 18, have now been arrested and remain in police custody. And the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has chaired an emergency COBRA meeting to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East, while the Prime Minister called for restraint and de-escalation. It comes as Israeli airstrikes continue to hit Hezbollah positions, including missile launchers and weapons depots. At least 550 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. 500,000 people have fled southern Lebanon. Airlines have cancelled dozens of flights, and Lebanese hospitals are overwhelmed, with more than 1,800 wounded. The UK and US have now both advised nationals to leave the region. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now I'm getting absolutely battered here by sausage-related puns regarding, of course, Sir Keir Starmer's slip-up earlier on. Quick couple here, and Darren says he's simply the worst Prime Minister ever. Yep, got that one. Laura, he'll get battered for this for years. Tony, he's a chipolata off the old block. Tony, I think you need to keep working on that one. Now, join me now, somebody who's always a dish, Michelle Dewberry. 6 till 7, Jubes & Co. What's on your menu?
Well, I too have had more sausage innuendos in the last couple of hours, Martin Daubney, than I think I've ever had in my whole adulthood. It was almost enough to have my hair curled, hence I've had to straighten it all. But of course, What a gaffe. That is much of what people are talking about at Keir Starmer's conference. But I do want to delve into the conference and his speech a little bit more. I've got Annunciata Rees-Mogg joining me and Tom Bewick. There's lots to discuss. I wonder, what do the viewers actually think of Keir Starmer? His tough talking, his promise of kind of bright days ahead and so on and so forth. Also, Yvette Cooper also talking tough about the streets of Britain today. Does it wash? Do people feel optimistic or not? I'll tell you who is optimistic. Mick Lynch, the union boss, he basically wants to seize control of the UK economy. Is that a good thing or not?
Super stuff frying tonight. Michelle Dewberry, 6 till 7, right after this, the queen of primetime political debate. Thank you very much. Now, next, I'll be asking if we live in a nanny state, as the government are apparently trying to shut our boozers earlier. They're hopping mad with no beers Keir.
Hello, welcome to your afternoon weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Should turn a bit drier for most overnights. Quite a chilly night across the north before further rain returns to southern areas tomorrow. All the heavy rain from the weekend and yesterday from this area of low pressure, that has cleared away, and it's been much drier today across England. But we have seen further rain coming in across northern Scotland with a northerly wind, also feeling pretty chilly here. Smattering of showers elsewhere, but they're tending to fade, and many places, as I said, will have a dry night. With clear skies, going to turn quite chilly. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing that colder air, so likely to see a touch of frost, certainly across the mountains of Scotland. Towns and cities holding up a few degrees above freezing, and quite mild again in the south, where there will be quite a lot of cloud. And a bit of a grey start for southern counties of England. There'll be some rain here, and there will be more showers coming in across northern Scotland. But in these central parts, as I said, temperatures are going to be down close to freezing to start Wednesday. Should be some sunshine through the central belt, across southwest Scotland. Fine start for much of Northern Ireland, just a few showers coming into the north coast. Quite a bit of cloud early on across parts of northern England, and quite a grey start across much of southern England and South Wales. Generally a dry start here, but things will change. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to see more rain pushing back in here as we go through the day, spreading across southwest England quite early on, and then into South Wales and later into the southeast of England and the Midlands. Across much of northern Britain, bar the odd shower here and there, many places actually dry and bright for most of tomorrow, but it will be on the cool side. Temperatures a touch below average, struggling into the teens. Further south, a little bit milder, but with the rain, it won't feel all that pleasant. And we're not done with the rain, far from it. Further heavy and persistent rain to come over parts of northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland and southern Scotland on Thursday. There's a Met Office warning in place for parts of northeast England where that rain could cause some further disruption. In the south, turning a little brighter and a little milder.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue heading west along the M8 towards Glasgow this afternoon. Those emergency repair works have closed 2 lanes at junction 13, where it meets the M80 at the Proven turn-off, causing queues. And on the M62 in Cheshire, the 2 inside lanes are blocked off eastbound from junction 11 to 12, heading towards the M60 at the Eccles interchange. A car broke down on that stretch earlier on. Recovery work is still underway. On the M5 in Worcestershire, lanes out northbound junction 4 and the Bromsgrove Stourbridge exit towards the Franklin services due to an obstruction of some kind. On the M4 in Berkshire, the inside lane is closed westbound just after junction 12, the field turn-off. Recovery work following an accident. And on London Underground, the District Line can't run High Street Kensington to Edgware Road following signalling problems at East Putney. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, pubs could be forced to close their doors early under new government measures. Now, what kind of wimpy, wokey nanny state are we living in? Please keep your hands off our boozers. Now, joining me now to discuss this is the head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Chris Snowdon. Chris, always a pleasure to have you on the show. So now, first they called him two-tier Keir, then it was free gear Keir. Now they're calling him no beers Keir. Now, they've quickly come out and denied that this is going to be policy. Chris Snowdon, I don't trust them. Am I a cynic?
Perhaps, but I think there's a lot to be cynical about. So, I mean, this came from a fringe meeting yesterday. The Public Health Minister, Andrew Gwynn, evidently did say that he was looking at operating hours for the drinks industry. It could mean off licenses, could mean nightclubs, could mean pubs, who knows. But certainly it would be of a piece with what we've already seen from this government in barely 2 months, which is kind of nanny state on steroids. And it seems that Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting in particular, I think, have been leaned on by Chris Whitty, who's been very active behind the scenes, lobbying for various fanatical nanny state measures. And they seem to genuinely believe that the only way the NHS can be saved is if everybody starts eating their greens and put down their pint glasses. So, they seem genuinely committed in a way that perhaps not even the Conservatives were in lifestyle regulation for the good of the NHS.
And as you said, Chris, this came from Andrew Gwynn, who's the Public Health Minister, who said on the record, we are thinking about tightening up the hours of operation of bars and pubs. So this isn't like made up. It didn't come out of the ether. Is this part of this constant, we saw it a lot during lockdowns, during COVID, they're nudging us towards this puritanism. They're dropping these ideas in there. They're quickly doing a U-turn. But the drip effect is that they promised, Chris, to tread lightly on our lives before they got into power. And they've already banned ciggies outside gigs, in gardens. Now they're threatening to clamp down on pubs. What next? Burgers, sugar, they're going to come for everything, right? They won't be happy till we're all vegans.
Yeah, they want to do a lot with food. They've already said they're going to introduce this ban on all sorts of food advertising in October next year. I think, again, at this meeting that Andrew Gwynn was at, which, it's a public meeting. This is not stuff behind the scenes. He's saying this stuff. Therefore, you have to assume it is at least in the minds of the government. But he said he wants to have more food reformulation and put more pressure on the food industry, perhaps even involving legislation saying that, you can't put this in your food, you can't put this in your food, you have to make your portions smaller, you have to take the fat out or what have you. They are going through it across the piece. We've already seen their commitment, obviously, to having a serious clampdown on smoking, including the gradual prohibition. They've introduced and talked about various things to do with the food supply. They want to crack down on vapes. They're probably going to ban disposable vapes at the very least. And now they're talking about booze, talking about the off-trade, talking about pubs and opening hours. You have to remember, it was the Labour government actually extended opening hours, relaxed licensing laws back in 2005. Actually, that was one of the great successes of that particular government. But now it seems like it's open season on everybody.
Do you think, Chris, that people are going to take to this, we know better for you, if only knew what was good for you like we do, or will people simply rebel against it? I mean, prohibition has never worked anywhere on the planet in the history of time. They can't win the war on drugs. How on earth can they win the war on pubs?
Well, indeed, yeah. But, pubs have been a whipping boy for a very long time. You look at the way the government, under the advice of Chris Whitty, were treated during COVID. I don't just mean during the lockdowns. I mean in between the lockdowns. We had a situation at one point where you could only go into a pub and sit on your own, and even then only if you were eating a meal, and you had to, stop drinking once you'd finished your meal. This was incredibly over-the-top behaviour from the government. Didn't do anything in terms of controlling COVID, but it showed me, I think, the kind of thing that Chris Whitty would like to do to pubs. And maybe I'm giving Chris Whitty too much of the blame, but I'm not sure I am. I think he has definitely been lobbying the government for various measures like this. The outdoor smoking ban is going to absolutely clobber pubs. It's going to finish off thousands of them without a shadow of a doubt. And restricting licensing laws, of course, will equally, do damage. Pubs don't need any more legislation to damage them. What they need actually is help from the government. They need liberalisation. But it doesn't seem as if the government really care. Perhaps if some pubs start banning various ministers and the Prime Minister from the premises, that might send out the right message. But I agree with you that I really don't see this outdoor smoking ban in particular as being enforceable. We're talking about banning people from smoking on the pavement. People have had enough, I think. Smokers have been kicked around for a very long time. And I don't think most people can see, why this is even being done in the first place. So good luck enforcing that. Good luck enforcing shisha bars, enforcing the smoking ban on shisha bars on the Edgware Road in the middle of Birmingham. I think the public health lobby might finally have met their match here, but we shall see. It certainly won't stop them trying.
Chris, could I quickly ask you, is there a broader kind of war on fun, like the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum? Is there a broader pan-Western world movement against people having a good time.
Yeah, because they see people having a good time as being a public health problem, basically. You know, you have some extremely sour-faced people who don't seem like they've, laughed in about 20 years, going around essentially regulating our leisure time. And the reality is most people go out to work and then they want to relax and they want to go to the pub and maybe have a cigarette or a vape, but certainly have a bit of fast food. And that is seen as being an existential threat to the NHS. Quite wrongly, by the way. The economics of this do not stack up whatsoever. And we have this vociferous, rather antisocial minority trying to spoil everybody else's fun. Yeah.
OK, Chris, we have the call time there. Chris Snowdon, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, anti-monarchists say that the royal family costs us £510 million every year. Are they really worth it? Well, I think they are. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are non-crime hate incidents a breach of your human rights?
It's crazy, isn't it? Freedom of speech is now on life support here, and we've had, in the last week alone, we've had Elon Musk being threatened. He's now out of Brazil with X. We've had the founder of Telegram basically being arrested, and he's been charged in France. We're not quite sure the circumstances why he was there, whether Macron invited him to the Olympics or whatever, but he's been arrested under several charges. And we've had all sorts of people who've been speaking out are basically being shut down. So it has to be freedom of thought. It has to be freedom of expression. It's one of our fundamental rights under the Human Rights Act of 1998. Article 10 gives you the right to express your opinion and also to air that publicly.
It's basically I say something that somebody doesn't like, so probably one of my monologues. Then somebody can then inform the police that I've upset them in some way. And then that goes on my record, so I now have a criminal record.
Yes.
Because somebody else who I've never met, who's never met me, has heard something that upset or hurt his feelings. Then if I go for a certain job or I go for my DBS check, which I do regularly because I go and talk in schools, somebody could pull that up and go, well, you did something that had hurty feelings, and so now you can't have that job. That has got to be a breach of my human rights.
Oh, it's absolutely. Article 10, it's a fundamental right to protect your freedom of speech and so on and so forth. And this is what's really worrying, because it's happening around the world, as I say, in Brazil, in France, in various other countries. In America, you know, Zuckerberg, he came out in the last few days and said the pressure that he was put under by the Biden administration, first of all about COVID, and even jokes he was told to suppress them. The other thing that he was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And he said he couldn't speak about that because they were telling him not to. And what he did, he had to fact check, and he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 10 to 6, final furlong with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Prince William has announced the 15 finalists of his annual Earthshot Prize Awards, competing for the £5 million in prize money. Now, they were selected from a record entry of nearly 2,500 nominations from 139 countries. Well, joining me now to discuss them is the GB News royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, so the final list is in, £5 million up for grabs. Tell us more.
Yeah, it certainly is, Martin. The Earthshot Prize Innovation Summit taking place in New York this week. Prince William has released a video message. I'm not sure if we've got that to show you to do with that. But 15 finalists, as you say, have well and truly been announced. And the Earthshot Prize is Prince William's 10-year project to find solutions to repair the planet over a decade. Big ambition. It's inspired by John F. Kennedy's Moonshot Prize. It seemed at the time impossible in the 1960s to put a man on the moon, but NASA achieved it. The same principle with Earthshot, but Prince William wants to solve climate change, essentially, within a decade. That's the idea. And it's all about being optimistic with him, I think, rather than the kind of doom and gloom scaremongering, which perhaps has turned some people off over the last 20 years or so. And he even had Hollywood royalty supporting him today, Martin. Matt Damon showed up. Someone in the newsroom earlier suggested I should use the pun Good William hunting rather than Good Will hunting. Of course, a reference to the Hollywood film that he was in, but I'll let you at home be the judge of that one. There's a couple of British finalists this year. A British startup, Nature Metrics, which is using environmental DNA to identify species populations and reports environmental and conservation impacts. MyAlgae has found a sustainable way to create more omega-free substances without killing lots of wild fish. The winners of the Earthshot Prize this year, 5 of them who are all up, who could get £1 million worth of prize money. They are going to be announced during a ceremony in Cape Town on the 6th of November this year. So watch this space.
Great stuff, Anna.
Delighted to introduce you to this year's 50 new Earthshot Prize finalists. These solutions are some of the most exciting, innovative and impactful we've seen, and the people behind them are true inspirations. I know you're as passionate as I am about making a difference to our planet, and we can't wait to share their stories with you.
Well, Prince William there really talking about his Earthshot Prize finalists. Unsure if he is going to be going to Cape Town in November. Kensington Palace has not yet confirmed it.
Still got the face fuzz as well there, Wills. I think he looks great in it. Now, got a little story to nibble at here. Republic, of course, they are the great unwashed anti-monarchy campaigners, not my king. They've come up with some spurious figures saying the true cost of the royal family is almost £500 million a year. Tell us more.
Yeah, they've released their own figures. Of course, we've got the sovereign grant, which is the official expenditure from the royal family, their accounts, and what they say the royal family costs the British taxpayer every year equates to around £1.20 per person in the United Kingdom. Republic, the anti-monarchy group, disputes that figure. They say the true cost is a lot higher. The biggest cost that they are estimating is £150 million of taxpayers' money used to fund royal security. Now, Republic want an elected head of state. I think perhaps one argument could be that even if we did have an elected head of state rather than a monarch, they would still need police protection, which would still cost money. So I'm not quite sure that 150 million figure would be saved if we got rid of King Charles.
But, of course, we all know, Cameron Walker, the true value isn't a value you can put a price on. The royal family bring us together, they make us unified, they make us proud to be British. That's something the Republic know nothing about.
It's the pomp and pageantry. I think it's what attracts people to the United Kingdom, some would argue, and I think a lot of the charitable causes that they champion, the Princess of Wales and her early years projects, Prince William with trying to end homelessness and his Earthshot Prize, which we just talked about, the environmental prize, they have a huge convening power, I think, the royal family, and getting people around the table to actually create real change. But of course, not everybody agrees with the royalists. There is a portion of the British population who would prefer an elected head of state.
Super stuff, Cameron Walker. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Now, that's all from me for now. Don't forget, Jubes & Co. is up next. Now, I'll be back tonight at 7 p.m. I'm covering for Nigel Farage. I've got a fantastic exclusive about Rushmore Council having homeless people dumped on it from London. I'll be speaking to the councillors. You won't believe these flats. They've got marble-lined showers and they've been given to homeless people at taxpayers' expense. I'll be back at 7. I'm Martin Daubney. See you then. Have a great evening.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your afternoon weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Should turn a bit drier for most overnights. Quite a chilly night across the north before further rain returns to southern areas tomorrow. All the heavy rain from the weekend and yesterday from this area of low pressure, that has cleared away and it's been much drier today across England. But we have seen further rain coming in across northern Scotland with a northerly wind, also feeling pretty chilly here. Smattering of showers elsewhere, but they're tending to fade, and many places, as I said, will have a dry night. With clear skies, going to turn quite chilly. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing that colder air, so likely to see a touch of frost, certainly across the mountains of Scotland. Towns and cities holding up a few degrees above freezing, and quite mild again in the south, where there will be quite a lot of cloud. And a bit of a grey start for southern counties of England. There'll be some rain here, and there will be more showers coming in across northern Scotland. But in these central parts, as I said, temperatures are going to be down close to freezing to start Wednesday. Should be some sunshine through the central belt, of course, southwest Scotland. Fine start for much of Northern Ireland, just a few showers coming into the north coast. Quite a bit of cloud early on across parts of northern England, and quite a grey start across much of southern England and South Wales. Generally a dry start here, but things will change. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to see more rain pushing back in here as we go through the day, spreading across southwest England quite early on, and then into South Wales and later into the southeast of England and the Midlands. Across much of northern Britain, bar the odd shower here and there, many places actually dry and bright for most of tomorrow, but it will be on the cool side. Temperatures a touch below average, struggling into the teens. Further south, a little bit milder, but with the rain, it won't feel all that pleasant. And we're not done with the rain, far from it. Further heavy and persistent rain to come over parts of northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland and southern Scotland on Thursday. There's a Met Office warning in place for parts of northeast England where that rain could cause some further disruption. In the south, turning a little brighter and a little milder.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are queues heading west towards Glasgow along the M8. 2 lanes are out of action at junction 13 at the M80. Those emergency repair works are underway after a lorry caught fire. Moving into Bedfordshire on the M1, the southbound exit Slip Road is part blocked at the Bedford exit, junction 13 at the A421, where a car's broken down, and of course the A421 remains closed south of Bedford because of the flooding. In East London, the road heading up to Tower Bridge, that is closed following an accident. Long queues either side of the river, back to Bricklayers Arms and back along the highway through Shadwell looking at the cameras. In South East London, the A2 is blocked westbound of the Falconwood interchange, so heading into London at the scene of a collision. And on the M3 in Hampshire, the inside lane's closed southbound at junction 11 near Winchester for emergency repairs. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could be